Welcome to Gems of Arabia, Dr. Serra. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, Hatem. It's such a privilege to be here.
The privilege is ours.
Really.
So tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
So my background is I'm Iraqi, Turkish origins from my family, Bahraini national. I'm very proud to be born in New York and really have grown up mostly in London, educated fully in England. So I've straddled both worlds, East and West, quite comfortably. Education was really at the forefront of my parents' upbringing. My sister and I were brought up to really be global citizens. My parents left Iraq in the late 60s and embraced the world at the time in the West and very much wanted us to grow up a product of the global world at the time. And so education was really that one thing that no one takes away from you. And really till today, I feel so proud and so grateful to them for making that sort of the cornerstone of my identity, from which one can do anything, you know. So I went to the American school in London when I was 5. We moved to London in 1980 from Bahrain. And at the time, my father wasn't sure about his business, and so he thought, well, London is the great place to be. Let's deposit the family in London and then figure it out. So I went to ASL, the American school in London, and at 12 years old, I was told by my dad that the future was going to be in England and there was no way I was going to the US for university. So he looked at me with in no uncertain terms and basically said, I want you to go to Oxford. So I kind of thought, well, sure does so everybody wants to go to Oxford. But anyway, he ended up pulling me out of the American school and putting me in a tutorial to prepare me for St. Paul's Girls' School. And then I ended up going to St. Paul's, which was highly rigorous, very, very academic, absolutely not what I was used to, but it shaped me. So I had gone to an American school. It was co-ed. I was doing well, but life was easy and it was social and it was fun. And all of a sudden I was pulled out of that at a very tricky adolescent age. And I went to a girls' school, so that was a big change, like we discussed earlier. Yeah. It was highly, highly academic, very rigorous. You had girls from all over London, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from different family backgrounds, and I felt very sort of alone. But the focus was really, I used it as a place where I went, I worked, I got the most out of it, and I left. And although socially, you know, I came out with, my best girlfriend is from St. Paul's with me since we were 13. So I think that was like a huge, a bonus.
Those are the dearest friends.
She's a great friend and a formidable woman in her own right. But it really was one of the most defining educational experiences because St. Paul's was about, you know, they say when you meet a girl from St. Paul's, a Paulina, that you immediately know she's gone to St. Paul's because we are a little opinionated. And we have an opinion and we have a voice and we don't take things easily. So anyway, we're a bit of a pain. But having said that, it was a great experience and it then prepared me to go on to Oxford. So I was an undergraduate at Oxford and I had such a fabulous time. I had no idea what I wanted to do after graduating. So I decided to do a master's and I continued and then I did a PhD. So.
And how was it being a Middle Easterner in such an environment? How did you feel the ethos was?
So that's a great question because I was so, you know, here I was straddling these two worlds. I had parents who were so global in their perspective and a father who was just such a visionary and a pioneer, not only in his work, but in his perspective of women and men. So we didn't grow up with any feeling of we were lesser than, or we were different, or this is for boys, or this is not for girls. So that I didn't have. Yet, there were very strained, sort of structured rules. What we are allowed to do and what we are not allowed to do. And we don't do this and we don't do that and you can't do this and you can't do that. So whilst all my friends were going out, you know, to bars or clubs at certain hours of the evening, I was literally going home. I mean, they'd be getting ready to go out and I'm like, oh, bye, it's 9:30. I have to go home. You know, my parents would have someone waiting for me to take me home because I wasn't allowed to take public transport. And I remember the one time I did, I got into trouble because I hadn't told them. And, you know, it was so exciting to get on the tube and, you know, walk down to Selfridges on my own. So there were certain cultural things that made it difficult. But I tell you, Hatem, that the struggle in identity creation led me to my academic pursuits, because had I not had that, you know, it's what got me into really understanding or exploring identity, culture, realizing that there's no one way to do anything.
It became your mission.
That really, I mean, yes, it very much did. And it permeated to the person I am and the way I live my life, the way I bring up my son, you know. And when I applied to do a PhD at Oxford, you know, I really wasn't Oxford PhD material. Like, I really don't know what I was doing there. I mean,
I disagree.
Well,
you have to stop downplaying yourself. Seriously.
I applied as an undergraduate to read Middle Eastern Studies and Arabic. And I did my dissertation at the time on the role of female education in the 20th century and, you know, how that developed. And then I went on to do a master's in comparative education because I was so interested in how education impacts us, because I was already starting to see how my elastic band, the more you stretched me, the more education I was being given, because I was being told by my father, education, education. So here I am, this elastic being pulled, but you don't ever go back to your natural form, right? Once you're pulled, that's it. You're a whole new dimension. And yet I was expected to conform to certain things that I could no longer conform to. Not because I was rebellious, but because you start to think out of the box. You start to question. When we talk about education, it's not a finite certificate you put on your wall, right? It's your mind. It's how you expand. It's how you agree. It's how you disagree. It's how you form self-identity. Yeah. So this started to evolve. And it created some trickiness in my family life, in my personal life. So when I started my master's, which was a one-year master's at Oxford on comparative educational systems, looking at different educational systems in Asia, in the US, in different countries, and understanding how they worked. And then I wrote a master's dissertation on a comparative study between Saudi Arabia primary school and Israel primary school. And I was very interested in the role of these two countries in using education as a way to form identity. Because here you had Israel, that was a state that had all these Jews from all over the world who didn't really speak the same language. And how did they form this identity? Through education. And Saudi at the time was undergoing Saudiization. And again, you had very tribal community. And again, they used education in an incredibly powerful way. So I did my dissertation on that, and then I went on to write my PhD, which was all about women and the role of education in their empowerment. So I interviewed 10 women who were leading change makers in their fields, from the first Arab Muslim Olympic champion woman who ran 1984 gold medal and won in LA, and grew up in Morocco with, you know, she didn't have money for shoes, but got a scholarship to the US and then went on to win the Olympic gold medal, became an IOC member, became Minister of Sport. And so you just think education was key to her empowerment. So I interviewed 10 women, and it was not supposed to be a generalization of how the bigger world works. I just wanted to understand how these women redefined their identity in a patriarchal world. And that really was a quest for me, trying to find my identity, you know. So that's kind of how I ended up doing what I did.
Do you feel like women now are still seeing as a token, or has it evolved over the years? Do you think that they still hold their own, or there's still work ahead?
I think that there's been so much progress made. Today, women, not only in the Middle East, but I think globally, achieve higher success academically than men. I think there are more women graduating, probably more qualified. We can circle back to that's a problem too, right? Because you have a disconnect between the young men and the women who are really outpacing, and it's creating problems socially in choice of husbands or not husbands or wishing to not get married, and I think that's creating some issues. But definitely there's been mega progress. But for women not to be tokens means they really need to be at the helm of the structural implementation of change, rather than just having a seat at the table, right? They need to be dictating the agenda. And I think it's coming. I don't think it's fully there. I think it's work in progress. And I'd say that for globally. I don't think anyone has really gotten it right, you know? And I do think it's something that it's a struggle. I think I know a lot of women who struggle within their family dynamics or at work. I certainly struggle. And I had struggles in my personal life trying to, how do you know, where does that female power stop and where does it start? And how do you, when culture says you can excel in this vertical, but it can't spill out to this vertical, you don't really get to, when you find your power, it's not limited to one vertical, right? Once you're, it's like weight loss. You can't be like, well, I want to lose weight on this thigh. You know, it doesn't work, right? You first lose weight everywhere, and then you keep going, then maybe you'll eventually lose weight where you want. So it's a difficult one to navigate. But I think, we are on the right road, and it's fantastic. I'll quickly give you a story. I was in Al-Ula in January, and I took some friends of mine who had never been to Saudi, Western, one Saudi and two Saudis actually, who also not so familiar with the new Saudi Arabia, let's say, plus some other friends. And we were in Al-Ula, and we went to...
Post-2030 vision.
Unbelievable. Your crown prince is really a legend. And, may he succeed in all that he wishes to achieve, because I visually see the change from when I used to go and now, and how the world is so receptive. And look, nothing happens overnight, but
I'm
really,
telling you, Dr. Sarah, all the things that we have been craving throughout, the earlier years, of course I wouldn't know. I was born like 5 years ago.
Of course.
But no, it's happening, everything. And I really think that, going back to what you're saying, that the future is definitely female. Men have to step aside. But I think it's fair. We had many moments. And definitely this is the future of female. I really feel most of the graduates of law school and medical school, women are in Saudi.
Mashallah, the women are ruling the roost. Yeah. So we went to Al-Ula, we went to Al-Maraya, and there was a local, of course, everywhere we went, it was all local guides, all phenomenal in English, so well versed in their specialty, from the stargazing to telling us about, the sites.
Based in Al-Ula.
All based in Al-Ula. And one woman, she was fully in her abaya and her shela and her, she had her face covering as well. Beautiful, eloquent, so seamless with foreigners. And I thought that was incredible. Here was this woman who probably 10 years ago or 15 years ago would not have thought for one moment that she would be with men and women working. Here she was giving us a beautiful tour. Her English was impeccable. She was so proud of who she was. And we, and the people around me, were so respectful of her identity. There was no judgment. And I think that no one's trying to be something they're not. Yeah. And I think that is what KSA has going for it. It's really
we don't need to mimic the West or mimic any other place. We are our own entity.
And I think that it's going to be a blueprint for other emerging nations and countries, because for so long it's been this notion of we need to Westernize, right? We need to adapt and embrace the Western way. And I'm not sure that that's really been so successful. You know, I mean, the West is having a moment.
Yeah, but I think every culture has its own identity, and this is the beauty of it now. When you start focusing on heritage or focusing on infrastructure, realizing what is our identity, because we finally have the freedom to be able to express and innovate and create and collaborate.
Yes.
But speaking of which, collaborations, I had the pleasure of meeting you through Princess Noura.
Oh, she's amazing.
When Prince Khalid, George Arnis had the event at the embassy. That was a beautiful collaboration.
Thank you.
Clearly, you're someone who has a passion for heritage. How did that come about? And care to tell us more about it?
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm happy that, you know, thank God for Princess Noura. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here with you.
Bless her. So one of my biggest supporters.
She's a phenomenal woman and a real, she's making waves, you know, a real change maker. She really is. She's a legend. So really this came about, you know, my quest has always been, firstly, I'm somebody who believes that the sum of the whole is so much more powerful than the I, right? So I don't want to go out and be a designer. I don't want to go out and do something on my own. There's so much out in this world. It's about finding partnerships and harnessing people's talents. And I think as an educator, I've always looked to find the potential that exists and water it and harness it. And I was in Riyadh. It was January 2023. And I went to visit a very dear friend, one of Princess Noura's cousins. And she said to me, Sarat, you're very involved in women and empowerment and culture and identity and fashion and everything. You need to go to see Art of Heritage. So she organized... Which, by the way,
you are wearing Art of Heritage.
This is my collaboration. It's the line. So this basically was as a result. So I went to visit Art of Heritage, and I saw the incredible work. And then I was gifted some beautiful pieces by this very dear friend of mine. And I came back in March of 23. And I was wearing one of those pieces. The Art of Heritage, meaning the traditional thobes and kaftans. It was all hand embroidered, very beautiful.
You have over 70,000 references,
I mean, the archives were phenomenal. But at that moment, I had just been introduced to this. And I thought, wow, this is fabulous. And then I got the clothes. And I was wearing it at an event. And I believe I had more people coming up to me asking me where they could buy my dress or my kaftan. And I just thought, well, what do you mean? This is one of yours, you know, Ahl al-Balad. Yani it's an Art of Heritage just down the road, somewhere in Riyadh. I'll give you the address. And I then ended up meeting Princess Noura, and we hit it off. And I said to her, you are sitting on a gold mine, but I want to take this and internationalize this and innovate this, because at the moment you have unbelievable women who are working as an NGO on these embroiders. But I want to take your archives that you have collected, and 50,000, or I went through 50 books just doing the research, and I want to make a a modern take on this that's machine embroidered and print on digital, so that everybody walking down the street can have a piece of Saudi heritage. And, you know, for me, fashion is not just something we just put on, but it really is a cultural statement. It's celebrating identity, it's having pride, it's dignity, it's belonging. And I felt like I could help contribute to creating a line that reflects that, where you can take the fashion and legacy. And
the brand is called Serra Kirdar?
It's called Sarat Kardar X Art of Heritage. It's a little long, but you know, we thought let's pilot this, and the idea is that we would launch a proper line going forward. So I put together this collection with my phenomenal team and with Princess Noura's team at Art of Heritage, who were incredible. We started this in April, and we had the show in October, which was a little crazy. So what we did is I took all the motifs that I love from the 5 regions of Saudi. So this is the shalqi flower, and it's something I think is beautiful. And this is all traditional Saudi motifs, which frankly, I didn't know about. And
you're incorporating also digital printing with embroidery as well, right?
So this is the digital printing, for example. Cool. And to be fair, this is a very new industry in Saudi. And if we put back on my education hat, this is where I want to fuse. If you said to me, Sarat, well, what do you want out of this? I want to create a line that fuses fashion and education. I want to create an enterprise out of heritage. So here you have heritage, you have legacy, you have innovation, you have modernizing it, creating capacity building. I want to be able to have Saudi-made digital printing Palazzo pants on silk. Why not? It does not need to go to Italy, as much as I love Italy. It can be made in Saudi Arabia. And that is what this endeavor is here to do. Obviously, this takes time. I really do hope that this is something that wasn't sort of a flash in the pants. I don't want this to be this one collection. There is a cultural, it's a passport to identity, and I would love to be able to work on that, involve the two kingdoms in this merger, and I think it could be something really that not only Saudis are proud of, and not only the women who are working on this, because it will create industry, but I want to be able to see fabulous Western women walking down the street in London having a slice of a little bit of Saudi heritage in a modernized way.
And you're single-handedly changing the narrative.
Well, no, definitely not single-handedly. I have amazing people who believe in me and who support me.
On the brand, in the sense where you are really creating this new mindset, but you're also coming up with solutions. Because it's one thing to change the narrative, but when you actually come up with solutions, it's another thing. Storytelling is great, but what comes afterwards? So, and I believe that this is the first step towards creating this kind of community that we need in Saudi. I mean, if you look at the lab, for example, which is part of the Fashion Commission, they started creating this more kind of infrastructure for me as a designer who has stopped designing. Of course,
this is, I mean, you know firsthand the challenge of where they started, right?
The production process is, there was no universe. There was nowhere to go to. You had to create your own infrastructure. So this is what we need now. But when it comes to mentorship, this is also part of the whole concept. A lot of designers in Saudi, they open their workshop and then they start. Someone like Mohammed Ashi, for example, he worked with Eli Saab for several years, did an apprenticeship, and then from there he took off and he became one of the biggest designers. So there's this lack of understanding of the importance of apprenticeship, mentorship. What are your thoughts on mentorship?
Well, I think mentorship is a cornerstone to sustainable legacy. And mentorship and mentors are how we thrive in society. We learn from people. We need inspiration. Leaders are there, and leadership far outlives a leader. Leadership is about leaving behind something that perpetuates. So I think it's very important, of course, everybody wants to be the chief, but before you can become chief, you really need to understand the nuts and bolts of any industry. And I think that, for example,
overcoming ego as well.
Yeah, I think very much so.
We discussed that
very
earlier.
much so. I mean, something small. Every time I go to Saudi, I get into an Uber. Mashallah, it's all Saudi drivers. And they're so well spoken and so polite, and it says so much to me that there's a 36 million population of people who are wanting to work and have opportunities, and that is how you build a nation building, right? That's nation branding. So when we circle back to mentorship, this is where people learn, and I think it's incumbent on people who have done well to bring in the younger cadre and to support and to create stages and mentorships, because that is where legacy and heritage is scalable. That's how I see it, and I feel that, for example, in terms of the Saudi and the fashion, the lab is incredible what they're doing, and they really are leading this innovation. So, what I want to do is collaborate with the Fashion Commission, collaborate with the lab, but really in the long run is to have a generation that are learning how to do the trade, My dear friend, the ambassador in the UK, Prince Khalid Bandar, he coined it so well. He said there's ability and capability. So there's a lot of ability. What someone like I would like to do is work on building the capacity building, so infrastructure, because narrative is wonderful, but narrative on its own is fleeting, and structure on its own has no soul. So it's this merger of how do you take narrative and merge it with structure, right? Building infrastructure, building legacy, creating cultural capital, because this is an investment in, there's infrastructural capital, but there's human capital and there's cultural capital. And I think that I'm hoping that this is, something that will open up to an investment in that world. So
in your view, is education the highest form of currency?
Sorry?
Is education the highest form of currency in your view?
Oh, gosh. I'd say
we
so.
know the answer is.
I think so. I think education gives you choice. And I think choice is the ultimate privilege. Whether as a woman you want to work or you don't want to work, or you want to have a family or you don't want to have a family, or you stay married or move on to other, the choice component is powerful beyond. I know many people who don't have the choice. And I feel that it's a huge privilege. And I think if one invests in themselves and in the education and in the know-how and capacity building, then you afford yourself choice in the long run. And I think that's empowerment and that's freedom.
Okay. So there's the Art of Heritage, and there's also Serra Kirdar, a brand which you are doing road shows with, you have different placement with it. Tell us a bit more about the brand.
So I really did a bit of a U-turn in my life. So, I spent majority of my life sort of investing in academia. I went to Harvard as a visiting scholar for a year, working on educational pedagogy and how to teach and stuff like that. And then I focused on building a family and homemaking. And I figured, well, I've done all this work on teaching, and I taught in England and I taught in the US, and I taught
where did you teach?
So in London, I taught for 1 year at a state school. Then I taught at Hill House, which was a private school in London where you would see kids walking through the streets in knickerbockers and these, brown V-necks. They're quite iconic in the London streets. And sometimes I'd be walking in the street with my class, and someone would be like, "Hey, Sarah," and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm working." It was like so funny. They're like, the kids would be like, "You know them?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's fine. But I worked as a teacher, 7 to 13-year-olds. And then I went to New York when I was writing my PhD. I needed a bit of a break from Oxford. So a friend of mine owned an amazing school on the West Side. And so I decided they were very kind enough to give me a teaching slot. So I did some special education teaching with some kids. The teaching nourished my soul, and we always say you've got to have purpose in life, right? So at the time I woke up and my purpose were these kids. So when I had my son, I thought, well, I can't possibly not focus on him because I've done all this work on children and education, and if I don't spend time with him, like, who's going to do that? So I actually decided to be a full-time mom, and I had the most joyous years of my life were playing with my baby and dancing and doing art and singing and all the dress-ups, and it allowed my inner child to come out and have another moment in life. But by the time he was 13, 14, I realized I needed to get going because soon my son would, be like, "See you later, Mom, I'm busy." And I didn't really want to be left thinking, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" But throughout my academic career, I always loved fashion. But not just fashion, like I didn't really follow trends. It's not, I was not really the person that would go and get the latest branded bag. Most of the time, that's just not really my thing. But I loved finding beautiful product. And I came from a family that really appreciated that. My father was a huge advocate for fine, beautiful things, loved, appreciated the artisanal work. I remember at Asprey, in the old days in Bond Street. It was in the old building, and it was a beautiful mix of an older building with modern. And every time he needed to buy a gift for someone, he'd say, "Hey, Sarat, come with me. Let's go to Asbury." And I remember walking into the store where it was all about the leather and the handcraft and the silver, and everything was just so beautifully done. And it wasn't scalable. There wasn't 1,000 of it. There weren't 17 stores all over the world. There was something very unique about, in those days, receiving a gift from Asbury. No matter how small it was made with such elegance and heritage, and a lot of English heritage at the time. So I realized that, having that upbringing, and then my father, the business that he started was in fashion. I mean, they bought certain brands like Chaumet, Gucci, Tiffany, etc. And so we were exposed to that as kids. And then, my mother was always so beautiful and glamorous. So I would go and find these designers and say, I really like that, but could you make it for me like this? But could you do that? And then when I realized that a lot of other friends of mine were sort of like, well, oh my God, we love that. Where did you get that? And at the beginning I would, give the number and like, oh, call them or whatever. And then I would then see these friends and they're like, oh no, we just didn't know what to do. And I realized people don't go out and look for things. Not everyone's a scouter. They want something kind of prepared and given to them. And so I thought, let me start my platform, serrakardar.com, which is a website, but most of what we do is through pop-ups, by invitation. We do a lot of private shopping through WhatsApp. And
you're supporting different designers
exactly.
as well.
And so I went and I scouted for talent, and my whole thing was very much coming back to what we said. It was shining a light on talent and finding these fabulous brands that were very known in their world, but not necessarily maybe in mine. And the cross-pollinating of, something that might be 50 pounds with something that was, more. And it wasn't about the money. It was about how you put it together. It was the curation, which I love. And it's not for everybody. But
and where are they from?
We have brands from all over the world. I have a lot of Middle Eastern brands. And I'm very proud because I didn't go looking saying, oh, I need a brand from Lebanon. It was, oh my God, I love this product. I love the woman behind it. 90% of my brands are female founded. And that, of course, resonates deeply with the bigger picture. These are women who are entrepreneurs. These are artisanal, or these are products made by communities of women. And it's slow fashion. And that uniqueness, these are the 4 pillars. But the brands are from the Middle East, across the Middle East, the US, Italy, Europe, Asia. So it's really very mixed. It's about building bridges, harnessing, understanding. I do collaborations and exclusives. But also, Hatem, what I love is a brand that would never have access to certain, let's say, individuals. Now, I see this individual who's incredibly prominent, from a country that might not really have any interaction with that designer, is now wearing her beautiful pieces of jewelry. And I think this is, in my own little world, that's my own little diplomacy.
Absolutely. That's also another important currency, which is diplomacy, understanding the importance of shedding light on creatives that don't normally have the opportunity. Now, if anyone wanted to be part of it, is there an application process? Just so I'm sure there's going to be people asking, how can I be part of...
You can inundate Serena, who is my right hand in my work. I think the best thing is our Instagram. So it's serrakardar.com. DM us. We're always open. I try and do things. I mean, we come to Saudi and we'll do a pop-up there, or we'll do collaborations. And I also bring in other people who are not necessarily in fashion, but who are lifestyle. Because I think, gosh, the women who buy from me would also love an opportunity to get, this incredible healer who might, help them unblock their energy, or this phenomenal beautician who helps take away all my pigmentation after being in the summer, in the summer sun. So it's that, like I said, it's the cross-pollinating, it's collaborating. I believe very strongly in relationships and building this, and it brings me joy.
I really think that your steps that you are taking have a great deal of substance, and I commend you for doing everything to really reach out to the community. As I was saying earlier, a lot of us, designers who started early, didn't have the ecosystem. Wished we had this kind of network of people who are there for the community. But two last questions, and then I'll leave you alone. I promise.
I love this. I could do this all day.
You're a natural. Who are the people that kind of impacted you the most? Obviously, I know your dad from previous conversations. But someone who really kind of made an impact for you to take this route.
I have to think. It's a really good question.
Sure. It could be a designer. It could be a historian. It could be.
You know what? I'll tell you. First and foremost, I mean, obviously, my parents.
Of course.
My father, and by the way, just a side note, when I did my PhD research, all the women I interviewed all said that their fathers were their biggest champions in becoming the people they became, which I thought was interesting. And that is very different from today, because today mothers who are now my generation, who have gone educated, far more emancipated, are the ones pushing their kids. Not that the fathers are not, but the mothers have a voice far louder than an earlier. So yes, my dad as well, and the combination of the two. I'd say my son. I think, my son has been the biggest driving force in my life. And I probably have been motivated to do something and harness my talent or everything that was sitting inside me and was kind of bubbling away and I didn't do, because I never wanted him. I believe in leading by example. As a person. I cannot preach what I don't practice. Again, generations have changed. I grew up in a world that was different, and maybe had some you too. Our parents could say something and they could do another. We don't have that luxury in the world we live in today. And I certainly subscribe to, if I want you to be someone who lives your truth and is the best version of you, then I need to do it. And so I'd say my boy has really allowed me to find what drives me and to just be courageous. And there have been many moments where I'm like, what am I doing? This is crazy. Like, what am I doing? I don't even have a fashion background. Like, who does this? And then I just think, you know what? If you don't do it, you'll never know. You love what you do. I love meeting people. I love bringing talent. And I love putting people together and exploring synergies. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am.
I mean, clearly you have a strong work ethic, and you're very driven, and you're talented, and you're visionary. And I think that all it takes is vision and talent. If there's no talent, if there's no eye, there's no vision, then there's no where to go, But I think that clearly you have that. So I think you also set the tone and an example to a lot of young entrepreneurs that want to pursue anything they're passionate about.
I mean, thank you. That's very kind. I do think, though, that support, friends have been incredibly supportive to me, family, and I'd say to anybody, opportunities sometimes come and you think, oh no, I can't do this. And it's at that very moment when you think I can't do it that you need to do it, because that's where growth comes, right? Because I'm sure in your career too, 100%, right? It's how do you stretch that elastic band? Because it's that stretching that is the constant, that's where youth and growth and evolution takes place. And so for as long as I can keep stretching, it stays relevant and purpose. Really, I just don't want to wake up one day and feel like I have no purpose, because I think that could lead to darkness.
Well, keep inspiring us. One last question.
Of course.
What is authenticity to you?
We love authenticity, Hatem. I mean, you need to trademark that, really. Authenticity is A, living in your own skin, and being able to look in the mirror and not feel like you're a fraud.
Okay.
Right?
Love that.
Yeah. And I think it takes many, many, many years and a lot of bumps to find your voice, to find one's voice. I don't think you can be authentic at 20. Not because you don't want to be, because you don't know yet. And I'd say to any younger me or anyone, you've got to try, you've got to explore, because when you don't like something, that's as important as knowing what you want. And, you know, sometimes people would say, well, what do you want? I'm like, I don't know what I want, but I'll tell you what I don't want. And then that voice starts to, you know, you find a way that it sinks, you know, and I think that's a privilege of age. I mean, turning 50 needs to have some perks.
I would never think it, mashallah. No way, mashallah.
But you get to own it. So authenticity is about owning it, and living true to what you preach, you know.
I definitely would not want to go back to, you know, 20s. The uncertainty.
Not in the world of today, also. I think it's so tricky out there.
Yeah, and that's definitely a plus. I think with maturity and knowing what you want with the years, it definitely sets you in a different, you know, path of gives you inner peace.
Yeah. And I think also our, you know, growing up, we didn't really harness the gut. You know, it was the voices and the noises and the people and parents and what we should do and al-mafrood and I think over the years, that authenticity that you talk about is also fine-tuning the noise and listening to gut. And the gut is really powerful. And I'm trying more to zone into that a little bit at times.
I completely agree. So. It has been a pleasure having you with us today.
So much. I'm so privileged.
The privilege is ours, and I look forward to many more conversations.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Hatem, to
really,
you and your team.
I commend you, Sarah. You're someone who is really making a change.
Thank you so much.
I respect your mission, your mindset, and how you look at things. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.